And now to our first conversation. Well, it's been 25 years of unbroken democracy, and we've been taking stock so far. Today we'll be drilling down on the oil and gas industry as it relates to refining. Nigeria has been importing refined petroleum products for many years, and now there's hope of changing that narrative with the Dangote refinery and other modular refineries. But will Nigerians ever be able to buy PMS and not cringe when you see the cost? Well, join us now to find out more about that is Mr. Eche Idoko, Publicity Secretary of Crude Oil Refinery Owners Association of Nigeria. Joining me right here in the studio. It's great to have you, sir. Definitely quite interesting times.
Yeah.
25 years of democracy, and just about 2 years ago now, we've been talking about refining, our own oil. And definitely, it's something to celebrate at this time. But even though we believe, or many quarters would believe that as an oil-producing nation, at some point within that 25 years, we should have been refining our oil already.
Thank you for having me. Just by way of introduction, my name is Joseph Owolabi, CEO of Rubicola. But in terms of the refinery and in terms of what we're doing in that space, I think it's good to know that despite the world moving towards more green ways of energy, there's still a transition approach that needs to be had. And a country of 220 million people and difficulty in energy and energy insufficiency.
Right.
I think the way to go is definitely creating our own energy supplies, especially when you think about the fact that the Russia-Ukraine crisis have resulted in challenges in energy across the world, not just in Europe.
Right.
I think it's still the way to go for Nigeria from that point of view. Obviously, there are challenges around ESG and all of that, and I can come to that in a bit. But I think it's an important
definitely an important one. And definitely, I got my guest a little bundle earlier. You are Joseph Owolabi, founder of Rubicola Consulting. It's great to have you, and definitely our conversation is about
valid.
green bond issuances, and definitely we know that it's not easy, pushing the green, mindset at this time, because Africa still relies heavily on oil.
Yep.
And looking at refining and all that, we're trying to get to that level, in Nigeria this time. But talk to me now about green bond issuance. We've seen a big growth there with green bonds in 2023, about $135 billion.
Correct.
And about $1 trillion in for the green social sustainability and sustainability. That's GSS.
Yep.
And that's referred to. So talk to me about this growth we saw in 2023. What would you say drove this? Because when you look at the whole prospect of going green, it still looks like we're moving really, really slow.
Yeah, I think just to put it in terms of context, right? Green bonds are very similar to your typical bond, vanilla bonds. In this respect, the only difference is that the proceeds from the bonds are targeted towards reducing the impact of climate change. And so if you look at what Nigeria has done over the last few years, back in 2016, Nigerian government, the federal government of Nigeria, became the first country and government in Africa to issue a sovereign green bond. So, and if you look at that, that's a significant step. And what the proceeds of that was devoted to, afforestation, dealing with deforestation in some part of the north, rapid bus transits in Abuja, and solar, which obviously is the way to go. If you look at it, that last year alone, more than 30% of the total energy used in the world comes from solar. It shows that there is an enormous potential there, and places in the north, in Lagos, there's still abundance of sunshine, and there's a lot of capacity there in terms of what we can do. Looking at the uptake of green bonds, there's still a long way to go. Globally, you see that there are a few hundreds of billions of dollars being raised every year, but we know that there's still opportunities there for governments. The federal government has issued once or twice subsequently, but also state governments. Lagos State issued something last year. A number of the states can take this up because there's enough opportunities there. Because when we think about how do we attract the funds we need, right? In terms of foreign direct investment, investors all over the world usually oversubscribe green bonds. So when you think about extra budgetary allocation, all of the social services that government needs to do in terms of healthcare, in terms of dealing with flooding and all of these issues, green bonds or climate finance presents an opportunity to raise funds to address some of those challenges.
Right, and definitely talking about, solar panels, when we had the whole Band A and Band D, we saw a lot of customers run to solar, because they couldn't afford to pay that, amount when it comes to electricity bills. So we're seeing that kind of like a plus.
Correct.
Pushing clean energy at this time. But, talk to me about these bonds really. What makes it attractive for investors?
So, if you take it back again to, many years ago, governments around the world have been gathering together, thinking about climate change. We know that climate change is an essential risk for this generation. Obviously, we've seen a lot of that here in Nigeria. We know what's happened with Lake Chad. We know what's happening in northeast in Nigeria in terms of terrorism. We've seen flood take over, not just Lagos, but even, some of our neighboring countries in East Africa recently. Tanzania, Kenya, and other parts of East Africa has been engulfed in flooding and earthquakes around the world. So definitely climate change is real. What's driving this, though, is the fact that governments around the world, 195 governments around the world, during President Obama of the US in 2015, decided to come together, about 196 federal government heads of state, to agree on what their target reduction would be in terms of 2030 milestone, 2050 milestone. And to drive that, you need financing. So if you're thinking about curbing emissions, right, you need to think about things differently. Buildings have to be constructed differently, smarter engineering. Like you said, solar, we can't keep doing energy business as usual in terms of fossil fuel. And that's where solar comes in. Of course, in Nigeria, the price of energy is spiked in recent times.
Yeah, I've seen some bills on social media and they don't look pretty.
It's insane, right?
All, yeah.
And if you think about the cost of living and standard of living, all of that, then it probably makes sense to go solar. However, there's still many challenges people have to deal with, right? The initial cost of acquiring solar and the batteries and the inverter.
Because I remember a time when, it was quite affordable.
Yep.
They were even begging people to take up these solar panels. But now, that has changed. And definitely we know the currency devaluation is also playing a big part, with that.
Fantastic. Obviously, we need to start developing some of these things locally, right? If all of the parts, supply chain that make up a solar panel comes from China or other parts of the world, then all of the effects. Even though
I heard that China's been flooding the global market with cheap panels.
Yep.
But they're still expensive coming in.
Yeah, it's the exchange rate, right? You've pointed that out. It's the exchange rate. Obviously, when you flood the market with those kind of things, you also think about quality, right? So China can give you quality stuff, but also we know that, depending on how much you pay would determine the quality. And also there's challenges with disposing of all of this, right? So it's not just enough to get the batteries and the panels. How can you recycle that? That's been a challenge. And there's a lot of that on the internet already in terms of that constituting waste and again, damaging the environment. So we need to be smarter engineering required so that you can recycle this and also make it cost efficient. In other parts of the world, like in France, in Australia where I'm based, the government also provide incentive for people to acquire this panel. So that's probably an area where local government, state government, federal government needs to incentivize people to be able to acquire this going forward. All
right, so Mr. Owolabi, you're going to hold your thought there, and I'm going to introduce now Mr. Eche Edoko, Publicity Secretary, Crude Oil Refinery Owners Association of Nigeria, because at the end of the day, it's about clean energy, but Nigeria is looking at refining at this time, and definitely that means refining fossil fuels. So Mr. Eche Edoko joins me from our Abuja studio. Great to have you on the show. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Ladi.
So definitely, we're all talking about refining our oil now. That's talking about Nigeria. After 25 years of democracy, just about 2 years ago, we started thinking of really, refining. So talk to me about the prospect of getting cheap PMS, at this time, because we've heard some quarters say because you're refining doesn't mean you're going to get, PMS for cheap. What are you thinking about that?
Oh, thank you very much. Just initially at the intro, I thought I was going to come in. So let me just take a leap from where your guest in Lagos had started. I would want to really appreciate those who have put faith in the midstream and the refining segment of Nigeria. Particularly, I would want to thank the pioneers, late Dr. Aret Adams and Dr. Lai Fatona of the then Niger Delta refineries, now Aradel, who started with the 1,000 barrels per day topping plant, which, by the way, had grown to 11,000 barrels today as we speak. And they are working on another 11,000 barrels hydroskimming plant that will be producing PMS. And to everybody who are foundation members of Quran, who have put faith in the refining segment, even with very little encouragement from the government and from the industry at the time. They faced daunting challenges from skepticisms by experts to lack of visible government structures and support, and they have weathered the storm. Today, we have Dangote, who is built a 650. We have Aradel, who is running an 11. We have Edo Refinery, who is running a 1,000. We have OPAC, who is running a 10,000. We have Walter Smith, particularly, who is also running a 5,000. And we have several others. We have a Cleargold, who is building a 20,000 hydroskimming, which will also run PMS. These are people who have put their faith, in refining in Nigeria. And interesting, people don't even know who these people are. A lot of them are experts who have served the country at various stages in the industry. Some of them are investment bankers who have come and seen the need and said, look, we can't continue like this. And they've thrown in their hats, putting in their savings and their investments. And today we see, like you have rightly pointed out, 2 years down the line, we are beginning to see refining activities within the private segment in Nigeria. So it's interesting. And then to your question, yes, I do remember we granted an interview in one of the media houses recently where we did say, and we stand by it, that if we begin in-house refining, if we begin local refining, we will see a significant drop in the price of per PMS, pump price of PMS, if we begin to refine PMS. And we have a lot of indicators that would buttress our point. For instance, when Dangote began refining diesel in large scale, we saw diesel dropping from almost 2,000 naira per liter to 1,200, and it could have still gone down. We are saying that just from simple analysis, in bringing in 1,000 liters of PMS, that's about 1,000 metric tons, it will cost you about $150 to $200 in freighting. Now, when you refine in country, you are going to knock off that price alone. And then when you are using modern refining technology through the modular refineries, let's say you're using a hydroskimming plant, you can cut the cost of refining a liter of a barrel of crude to as less as $5. Now, these are costs that you are going to cut off, and it will directly, reflect on the pump price at the filling station. So yes, right, with refining, we are going to get a significant drop in what the pump price is right now.
Okay, can you put a figure to that possible significant drop?
Okay, so this is tricky. This is tricky because it's a matter of metrics. It's a matter of figure out that the costs are there, and these are not fixed. They change per time. But I can tell you that from what I have said, if you add to it, like if you have a barrel of crude, for instance, you can produce 80 liters of PMS. Then if you cut off the cost of refining, you cut off the cost of freighting, it can come down. But it will be difficult for me to give you an actual figure now. But within a range, we can have something within the range of 500 to it can even come as low as 300, which was what we have said in the other interview. But then, like I said, it will be misleading to attach a fixed figure to how much PMS can come, because a lot of other factors apart from this determine. FX issues are still a major factor, which we haven't gotten around. The cost of of crude itself in the market, it's a major factor. And your guest in the Lagos studio did mention the conflicts, because of the conflicts in most of the freighting routes right now. All this coming to affect whatsoever the final cost would be. But what we can tell you is that if we are refining our PMS in country, we are going to, experience significant drop in whatsoever the pump price is right now.
You did mention, FX issues that could pose, a risk to getting this significant drop, in PMS prices. But what about oil production? Is that posing any risk at all to having lower PMS prices?
Yeah, well, it will. We would need to improve our production. And to be fair to the NUPRC and the government, a lot has gone into ramping up our production. These things are not rocket science. They won't happen immediately. We are foreseeing that in the next 24 months, 18 months, we are likely to see an increase in our output. Some of the assets that were recently divested, would begin to see them produce. So we hope that would come in. So there are efforts already towards improving the volumes that our output, as it were. But what we haven't seen significantly is efforts towards, empowering the local refining, which is a major factor. You can only get as much from your crude production when you enhance your domestic refining capacity. When we sell, we're still doing the same thing the same old way. I won't get a different result. The game changer for us will be when we ramp up our production, we would also have ramped up our refining capacity. It is then that will begin to reap the benefit of even increased production.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Dokubo. Let me bring it to Mr. Wolabi right here with me in the Lagos studio. So definitely we're ramping up plans now. Everyone wants, cheap PMS, at this time. I want cheap PMS. I don't like how much I pay to fill up my tank, at this time. But, talk to me about how all of this is playing into, this prospects for green bonds, in Nigeria, because at the end of the day, there's a risk that we might not really pay attention to, transition at this time. We're trying to refine. What do you think?
I think like every growing economy, if you look at Southeast Asia and South Asia, where you've got millions of people, Malaysia, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, there's challenges with growth, right? And so Nigeria being 220 million people or what have you, it means we need energy. And so I think it's just transitioning, understanding that yes, we need to reduce emission from a climate perspective, but we also need to power the growth. And we've seen that done in places like India, just going all in, and China over the last 40 years. Nigeria needs to do the same. However, definitely with energy and fossil fuel coming from places like Dangote refinery, there's a place for that, because we need to power our growth in manufacturing, which we still can't do. However, we also need to start thinking about innovative ways to leapfrog. So we're in the fourth industrial revolution. How do we catch up with other economies around the world? And it's going to be in the space of technology, digital solutions. And we're doing that already. There are quite a number of unicorns that have come out of Nigeria in the fintech space. But there's a lot we can do. We can also look for smarter ways, in terms of, we talked about the solar technology, but also in terms of carbon markets. That's a new one coming on board. How do we ensure that we don't miss out on this while we're still focused on fossil fuel? So the way to go in terms of cheaper PMS, I don't know if that would happen around the world. It's becoming even challenging. We're seeing the geopolitical tensions have a role to play in pricing of fuel, of diesel, and all of that. And that's not going to stop, right? We've seen in recent times also China flexing its muscles in the Southeast Asia space. You don't know what's going to happen with China and some of those markets. We've seen Australia, UK, and US with the AUKUS deal. We've also seen recent times Cuba and Russia and all of that, what it means for the North American corridor. So it looks like, when you ask economists around the world, next decade, there's going to be all of this volatility in geopolitical tension. So I think it's reasonable to expect that there will still be further increase in the global price of oil. And that's why, for us as a country, we need to diversify our energy base. It's good to have Dangote refineries, but like we've pointed out, we need to start thinking of modular refineries, which is happening already. But more importantly, how do you empower households where you can generate you're self-sufficient? Most of the energy, the fossil fuel, the diesel that come out is used to power generators in individual homes. We don't need that. If people have solar panels, which government can subsidize, then it means at least you can take care of your immediate needs, right? It's now left to the industry, industrial sector to now, depend on all of that. So I think there's a lot of opportunities as well as challenges, but if we work together and we have the appropriate policy, then we can meet the demand of the time.
Make the demand of the time. All right, let me take this to Mr. Edoko in our Abuja studio. Definitely, Mr. Olabi did mention subsidies for solar panels and cleaner energy. What are you seeing for subsidy payments on PMS, going forward with all of these refineries coming online?
Okay, so in the oil and gas segment, the conversation on subsidy, I think, has been overflowed. We have always maintained that wherever you have a subsidy regime, it can be a ground for breeding fraud, like we are seeing in time past. Where we would encourage the government to cut down on subsidy and completely eradicate subsidy in the area of petroleum products sales. We are in another breath saying that the government ought to create an enabling environment, because if you are removing subsidy, you must create something that can cushion the effect of subsidy. And we say rather than throw money at the problem, you should create a sustainable structure. And what is that sustainable structure? You must have an initiative, you must have a program that can ensure energy sufficiency for you, and that's to grow your domestic refining capacity. And that's been the message, that's been the thrust of the message of Koran since we came in. We've been saying, look, we want to sit down with you, government, let's etch out a strategy to make Nigeria self-sufficient in product refining. And government will have to look this way. You can't keep pampering the boys that import. You can't keep pampering these boys. You can't keep spending your effects, on people who do not want to improve your economy, because that's what an average product importer does to you. And so we're saying, why would we not emphasize subsidizing this product, importation of this product? We can, in a way, find a structure where we can encourage domestic refining.
All right, thank you so much. We'll have to leave it there now, Mr. Eche Edoko, Publicity Secretary, Crude Oil Refinery Owners Association of Nigeria. That's Koran. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. And also right here in the Lagos studio, Mr. Joseph Olabi, founder, Rubicola Consulting. It was great having your perspective today. Thank you so much.
Yep, I appreciate it.
All right, we'll take a break now. When we come back, we head straight to the markets to find out what's going on right there and in the global markets we track. That's in a moment. Just stay with us.